Picture this. She's telling you about her terrible day. Her boss was unfair. Her friend betrayed her. She's on the verge of tears. And you, because you're a good man, you immediately start offering solutions. Here's what you should do. Maybe try this. Have you thought about? And the more you try to help, the more distant she becomes. Here's what's really happening. The moment you started fixing her problems, you failed a test you didn't even know you were taking. And that failure just cost you her respect, possibly even her attraction. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why your instinct to solve her problems is actually pushing her away, what she's truly seeking when she opens up to you, and how to respond in a way that deepens her trust instead of breaking it. This isn't just about romantic relationships. This is about your identity as a man. Because if you can't hold space for someone else's emotions without losing yourself in the process, then you're not leading, you're following, and no one, not your partner, not your children, not your colleagues, will respect a man who can't stay grounded when life gets messy. But here's the part that will shock you. The very trait you think makes you compassionate, your need to fix everything, is actually a form of weakness. And I'll prove it to you. Let's start with something you need to understand at your core. When a woman shares her struggles with you, she's not handing you a problem to solve. She's asking you a question. And that question is this: can I trust you to remain steady when I'm not? Think about the last time someone you cared about was upset. Your first instinct was probably to make it stop, right? To fix it, to calm them down, to offer solutions. But here's what you didn't realize. That urgency to make it better wasn't about them. It was about you. You couldn't handle the discomfort of seeing them in pain. And here's the brutal truth. If you can't sit with her discomfort, how can she trust you with the bigger challenges life will throw at both of you? Ask yourself honestly, when she's emotional, are you listening to understand her, or are you listening to find a way to end the conversation? That right there is the difference between presence and panic, and she can feel which one you're operating from. I once worked with a man, let's call him David, brilliant engineer, could solve complex problems at work in minutes. But when his wife would come to him upset, he'd panic. He'd offer advice she didn't ask for. He'd get defensive when she didn't immediately feel better. And over time, she stopped opening up to him entirely. Not because he was a bad man, but because she learned she couldn't bring her real self to him. Here's what broke my heart. David thought he was helping, but what his wife needed wasn't a consultant. She needed a companion, someone who could sit in the mess with her without needing to clean it up immediately. The irony? The moment David learned to just listen, truly listen, without trying to fix, his wife started solving her own problems faster. Why? Because she felt supported, not managed. Now, you might be thinking, so I'm supposed to just sit there and do nothing? That sounds passive. No, holding space isn't passive, it's one of the most active things you can do. Let me show you the difference. Wrong approach. She says, I'm so overwhelmed. You say, well, here's a list of things you should do. Right approach. She says, I'm so overwhelmed. You say, that sounds really hard. Tell me more. And then you stop. You don't interrupt. You don't jump in with solutions. You just listen. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. She starts to see you as the one person in her life who doesn't need her to be fixed. And that safety, that becomes the foundation of everything else. Trust, intimacy, respect. But let's dig deeper, because there's something more disturbing happening when you try to fix her emotions. Something that's quietly hurting your relationship and your sense of self. When you try to fix her emotions, you're not being helpful. You're trying to control an outcome you can't control. And the moment you do that, you've handed her the power. Why? Because now your peace depends on her emotional state. Think about it. If her sadness makes you anxious, then she controls your anxiety. If her anger makes you defensive, then she controls your defensiveness. You're no longer leading, you're reacting. And here's the tragedy. You think you're being strong by solving her problems, but really, you're showing her you can't handle your own discomfort. And that's weakness disguised as kindness. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Would you respect someone who needed you to be happy all the time? Someone who couldn't function unless you were in a good mood? Of course not. You'd feel burdened by them. Well, guess what? She feels the same way when you can't stay grounded unless she's calm. I knew a couple, married 15 years. The husband was nice, always trying to keep the peace, never rocked the boat. And you know what his wife told me in private? I don't respect him anymore. He's more like a child seeking my approval than a partner I can lean on. That broke my heart because he had no idea. But here's the good news. Once you understand that her emotions are not your responsibility to fix, you're free. Free to actually be present. Free to actually support her. Free to be the man she needs. Your job isn't to make her happy. Your job is to remain steady while she processes what she needs to process. That's it. That's leadership. And when you do that, when you stop trying to control her emotions and start trusting her to handle them, something magical happens. She starts to trust herself more, and she starts to trust you more deeply than she ever could before. Now, here's where it gets even more nuanced. Because when she's talking to you about her problems, she's not just venting. She's unconsciously evaluating whether you're the kind of person she can build a life with. And she's doing it through a lens you've probably never considered. In every relationship, there's an unspoken question. When life gets hard, really hard, will this person fall apart or hold steady? And women evaluate this long before life actually gets hard. They evaluate it in the small moments, like when she has a bad day. Have you ever noticed that she sometimes seems to bring up small problems that don't seem that serious? Here's why. She's not catastrophizing. She's checking. Not maliciously, unconsciously. She's seeing how you respond to minor stress so she can predict how you'll respond to major stress. And if you panic, get defensive, or shut down over the small stuff, she's learned everything she needs to know about how you'll handle the big stuff. And it terrifies her. Here's a question that might sting. Can you hold space for difficult emotions in yourself? Because if you can't sit with your own fear, sadness, or uncertainty, you definitely can't hold space for hers. I've seen this pattern so many times. A man avoids his own emotional life. He stays busy. He distracts himself with work, screens, hobbies, and then when his partner gets emotional, he has no capacity for it because he's never developed that muscle in himself. So here's the real work. Before you can be present for her, you have to be present for you. You have to be willing to sit with your own discomfort. That's the foundation. Let me reframe something. She's not looking for you to be perfect. She's not even looking for you to always have the answers. What she's looking for is someone who won't collapse when things get messy. Someone who can say, I don't know what to do right now, but I'm not going anywhere. That's the man she can build a life with. That's the man she'll respect in 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. Not the guy who had all the solutions, the guy who had the strength to stay. But here's the hard part. Staying grounded when someone else is emotional requires something most men have never developed. And that's what we need to talk about next. Let's clear up a massive misconception right now. Emotional discipline does not mean being cold. It does not mean suppressing your feelings. And it definitely doesn't mean pretending you're unaffected by things that matter to you. Suppression is when you shove your emotions down and pretend they don't exist. That's unhealthy. That leads to explosions later. Discipline is different. Discipline is when you feel everything fully, but you don't let those feelings control your actions. Let's say she says something that hurts your feelings. Suppression says, I'm not hurt, it's fine. Discipline says, that hurt, I feel it, but I'm not going to react from that hurt. I'm going to pause, breathe, and respond from clarity. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt a strong emotion, but chose how to respond to it rather than just reacting? If you can't remember, that's a problem, because that's the skill that changes everything. Here's one of the most powerful tools I can give you, the 3-second pause. When she says something emotional, before you respond, count to 3, just 3 seconds. Breathe. Notice what you're feeling, then choose your response. Those 3 seconds do something neurologically. They shift you from your reactive fear center to your thinking, choosing center. 3 seconds. That's all it takes to shift from reaction to response. Try it today. The next time anyone, says something that would normally trigger you, pause for 3 seconds. You'll be shocked at how different your response is. And more importantly, you'll feel more like yourself. Here's something most people don't realize. Your words might say I'm calm, but if your tone is sharp or your body is tense, she's reading the tension, not the words. Emotional discipline shows up in your whole presence. Lower, slower speech equals grounded. Fast, clipped words equals reactive. Relaxed shoulders, steady eye contact equals present. Crossed arms, fidgeting equals defensive. And here's the beautiful part. When you master this, you don't just change how she responds to you. You change how you feel about yourself. You stop being a victim of your emotions. You start being the author of your responses. All right, theory is one thing, but let's get practical. What does this actually look like when she's upset and you're sitting there trying not to lose your mind? Picture yourself as a tree, deep roots, strong trunk. When the wind blows, when her emotions swirl around you, the branches might sway, but the trunk doesn't move. The roots stay firm. That's your job. Be the tree. Physically, plant your feet. Feel the ground beneath you. Breathe into your belly, not your chest. Chest breathing equals anxiety. Relax your jaw. These physical cues tell your nervous system, we're safe. We don't need to react. When you're calm, your nervous system literally regulates hers. This is science. It's called co-regulation. Your calm presence can bring her back to baseline faster than any words. Let's make this dead simple. Here are the do's and don'ts. Don't say, calm down. That's invalidating. Don't say, you're overreacting. That's dismissive. Don't say, here's what you should do. That's controlling. Do say, I hear you. That's validating. Do say, that sounds really hard. That's empathizing. Do say, what do you need from me right now? That's empowering her. I watched a friend do this last week. His wife was venting about something at work. Instead of offering solutions, he just said, wow, that sounds frustrating. What do you think you want to do? And you know what happened? She paused, thought about it, and came up with her own solution, and then thanked him for helping. He barely said anything, but he gave her space to think. Now here's the nuance. Sometimes she does want your perspective, but here's how you know. She'll ask for it, directly or indirectly. She'll say, what do you think I should do? Or am I crazy for feeling this way? That's your cue. Even then, don't just bulldoze in with advice. Try this. Do you want my honest take, or do you just need to vent? Let her guide. That's respect. And here's the magic. When she feels heard first, she's 10 times more open to your input. Because now she knows you're not trying to fix her, you're trying to partner with her. Here's what most men don't realize. This isn't just about handling one emotional conversation. This is about becoming a different kind of man. The kind women remember for the rest of their lives. Every time you stay grounded when she's emotional, you're making a deposit into the trust bank. And over time, those deposits add up. She starts to see you as someone who won't abandon her when life gets hard. And let me tell you what that creates. A woman who feels safe enough to be fully herself with you. No masks, no pretending. That's intimacy, real intimacy. Years from now, when life throws something truly difficult at both of you, a loss, a crisis, a major decision, she won't wonder if you can handle it. She'll already know because you've shown her 1,000 times in the small moments. This skill doesn't just change your romantic relationships, it changes how you show up as a father, a friend, a colleague, because the man who can hold space for difficult emotions is the man people trust. Think about the people in your life you turn to when things get hard. What do they have in common? They don't panic, they don't judge, they just hold steady. That's the man you're becoming. And that version of you, that's not some distant fantasy. That's who you are right now, underneath the reactivity and fear. You're just remembering how to access it. Let me be blunt about what happens if you don't develop this capacity. You'll spend your whole life feeling like you're walking on eggshells. You'll resent the people you love because you feel responsible for their emotions, and they'll resent you because they'll feel like they can't be real around you. And here's the worst part. You'll pass this pattern down. If you have kids, they'll learn from you that emotions are something to fear and fix, rather than feel and process. And the cycle continues, but it doesn't have to be that way. Now here's where a lot of men get confused. They think being supportive means having no boundaries, that being a good partner means being available 24/7 for every emotional need. and that's where they hurt themselves and the relationship. Codependency is when your emotional state is entirely dictated by someone else's. If she's happy, you're happy. If she's upset, you're devastated. That's not love, that's enmeshment, and it's suffocating for both people. Ask yourself honestly, do you avoid doing things that might upset her, even when those things are important to you? Do you feel guilty when you prioritize your own needs? If yes, you're in codependent territory. And here's what women won't tell you. They lose attraction to men who have no boundaries. Because a man with no boundaries has no self. And you can't respect someone who doesn't respect themselves. What do healthy boundaries look like? I want to support you, but I need you to speak to me respectfully. I'm here for you, but I also need time for myself. I care about your feelings, but I can't take responsibility for managing them. The key is tone. These aren't ultimatums. They're statements of fact, delivered calmly, clearly, without defensiveness. You're not punishing her. You're teaching her how to treat you. And here's what's counterintuitive. When you set clear boundaries, she doesn't pull away. She respects you more because finally, she's with a man who knows his own worth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is remove yourself from a heated conversation, not as punishment, as preservation. I need some space to think clearly. Let's talk in an hour. That's maturity, not avoidance. But here's the hard truth. If someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, refuses to take responsibility for their own emotions, and makes you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, that's not a partnership. That's a painful situation, and you have to be willing to walk away. Knowing you can walk away is what allows you to stay grounded when things get hard. Because you're not trapped. You're choosing to be there, and that choice changes everything. Here's something that might sound harsh, but you need to hear it. People will treat you exactly how you teach them to treat you. And if you've been accepting disrespect, dismissiveness, or emotional manipulation, you've been teaching the wrong lesson. Every time you accept being spoken to disrespectfully, you're signaling, this is acceptable. Every time you drop everything to manage her emotions, you're signaling, my time doesn't matter. She's not reading your mind, she's reading your actions. I knew a man who would cancel plans with his friends every time his girlfriend got upset. He thought he was being supportive, but what she learned was, if I get upset, I control his schedule. After 2 years, she had zero respect for him. Not because she was cruel, because he taught her he had no boundaries. But here's the flip side. The moment you calmly but firmly say, I won't continue this conversation if you're yelling at me, and actually follow through, you teach a different lesson. You teach, I have standards, and I'm worth being treated well. Setting a boundary means nothing if you don't enforce it. If you say, I need space, but then text her 20 minutes later, you've just taught her your boundaries are negotiable. Here's the framework. State the boundary clearly. I'm happy to discuss this, but I need us both to stay calm. Give one warning. If we can't do that, I'm going to step away and we'll talk later. Follow through without anger. If she continues, you calmly leave. No drama, no lecture, just action. And here's what's fascinating. The first time you do this, she might get more upset. She's testing whether you mean it. But if you stay consistent, calm, clear, unmoved, she'll adjust. Because she'll realize you're serious about your own well-being. Once a woman sees that you have boundaries and you enforce them without being cruel, something profound happens. She feels safer, not less safe, more safe. Why? Because now she knows exactly where the edges are. She's not guessing. She's not testing. She can relax. And here's the beautiful irony. The man who's willing to walk away if not treated well is the man she's most afraid to lose. Not because he's manipulative, because he values himself. And that self-value is magnetic. Years into the relationship, she'll tell you, I respect you because you never let me treat you badly. That's the gift of boundaries. Not control, respect. So let's bring this full circle, because we started with a simple scenario. She tells you her problems, and now you understand this was never about the problems themselves. It was always about something deeper. When a woman opens up to you about her struggles, she's not looking for you to fix, solve, or manage. She's looking for you to be someone grounded, someone present, someone who won't collapse under the weight of difficult emotions. hers or yours. And the reason most men fail this test isn't because they're bad men. It's because no one ever taught them that masculinity isn't about having all the answers. It's about being unshakable when there are no answers. Here's what changes when you master this. She stops testing you because she already knows you're solid. She opens up more because she feels safe doing so. She respects you deeply because you respect yourself first. And you stop feeling like you're walking on eggshells because you're not trying to control outcomes you were never meant to control. But more than that, you feel different. You're no longer at the mercy of someone else's emotional state. You're no longer shrinking yourself to keep the peace. You're no longer abandoning your own needs to prove you care. You become the man you've always known you could be, the kind of man people trust, the kind of man people respect, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Doing this work is hard. It requires you to face parts of yourself you've been avoiding. It requires you to set boundaries you've been afraid to set. It requires you to let go of control you never actually had. But the alternative is spending your life feeling small, feeling resentful, feeling like you're never enough, no matter how much you give. And you deserve better than that. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Right now. The next time anyone comes to you with a problem, try this. Instead of jumping to solutions, just say, "Tell me more." That's it. 2 words, and then listen fully, without planning your response. Notice how you feel when you do that. Notice if your chest gets tight, if you feel the urge to interrupt, if you feel uncomfortable. That discomfort, that's the edge of your growth. Sit with it. And if you want to go deeper, if you're serious about becoming the kind of man who doesn't just survive relationships, but thrives in them, subscribe to this channel right now. This is Charisma, a space for men who are done with surface-level advice and ready for the truth, the uncomfortable, transformative, life-changing truth. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, because the next video is going to challenge you even more than this one did. We're going to talk about what happens when she starts testing you in ways you didn't see coming, and how to handle it without losing your center. Remember this, strength isn't about never feeling. It's about feeling everything and still choosing your response. That's power, that's freedom, and that's what we're building here. See you in the next one.